Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Saturday morning session of the Mormon Expositor General Conference Review, where you will get 10 hours of General Conference, not as much of us talking, but we will go over it and dissect it for those of you who actually wanted to watch it and hear our thoughts, or for those of you who didn't want to watch it and at least sound informed when you have discussions about it. So let's introduce the panel. My name is Brandt. I'll be hosting today. To your radio left is Heather.
Hello.
Good to have you on. For everyone's information, I was messaging Heather during conference, and one of the questions I asked her was, so am I going to get feisty Heather or playful Heather? And I think we might have playful Heather. So that's good news for me, bad news for everyone else, because I know people like feisty Heather. To your radio right, we have Jerilyn. Jerilyn, how are you?
I'm great, thank you.
So do I get feisty Jerilyn or playful Jerilyn?
Is there a difference?
Or awkward Jerilyn?
Awkward. Always the awkward Jerilyn.
I'm hoping for lots of awkward jokes. So here's what we want to do this year. I think we decided internally that what we want to do is, for the different hosts that we have hosting it, we're all going to put our own little flair on how we do it. And I think we decided what we want to do for the Saturday morning session is we want to spend most of our time talking about the three big speakers and talks that you're going to be hearing about, and probably that made the most impact at conference. And then we'll kind of fill in with all the other ones that either didn't say anything interesting or were members of the 70 that, frankly, we'll probably never hear from again.
Those members of the 70.
Or if they're, well, I didn't want to say something sexist, like members of the General Relief Society presidency. But speaking of which, let's talk about one of the members of the General Relief Society presidency. Her name was Sister Carol Stevens, and she's the first counselor. Was that right, Jerilyn?
Yes, first counselor in the
First counselor.
General Presidency.
And she, before we get into actually what she talked about, I will just preface this by saying, if you did watch it, I was so confused because there was a lot. Someone had mentioned on the Mormon Hub Facebook group that we should be doing a drinking game with how many times she brought up the word priesthood, because she brought it up so many times. The focus of her talk, I think we can agree, the focus of her talk was something along the lines of priesthood. Right?
Priesthood
Yes.
Ordinances, the blessings of the priesthood, being a steward of the priesthood, that kind of thing.
Accessing the priesthood.
Yeah.
But it was kind of clouded, wasn't it? Because usually when we hear these talks, especially, again, not trying to be sexist, but especially when we hear them coming from a woman, it's usually a talk from a woman to women telling them how important it is for the priesthood to be in their lives, or is from a woman to men telling them, men, you need to be worthy because we need you so we can have the priesthood. But this kind of bounced around the line of, with all the information out there about ordained women and what they're hoping to do this weekend, it sounded like she was kind of talking to them maybe about female priesthood, but it kind of wasn't. And she bounced across the line a lot, it seemed like to me.
I think that on its face, it can be seen as a gentle rebuke of ordained women if you want to look at it that way. However, the content of her message sounded an awful lot to me, if you want to look at it this way, like a case for women being ordained.
As a matter of fact, one of the quotes that she had that caused a lot of ripples was something along the lines of, we need to receive the temple endowment, which is priesthood power. And there was a lot of people that said, wait a minute, did she just say that women have the priesthood? Was I the only one that picked up on that?
I caught that too. I think that she talked a lot about how women have access to the priesthood. And that is that is the main way she discussed it, that we only get it through an endowment in the temple.
What about you, Heather? What were your thoughts when she mentioned that?
I wrote it down. It stuck out to me, but it's not the first time that I've heard this argument. I mean, even Mike Tannehill says women have the priesthood in the temple, not only because they receive their endowment, but because they are performing ordinance work. They're doing washings and anointings, right?
Right.
Yeah. And it's a woman that does it. It's not like
right.
The women go into a special room with the man and the man does that. It's all done by women.
Right. So it's not the first time.
It's done by women for women and done by men for men. Mm-hmm. It's still gendered.
So, Jerilyn, you mentioned something about the need for priesthood. She went into this story about women in Honduras, and I think that was another one that confused me. What was she talking about with that woman in Honduras story, and what were your feelings when she was talking about that?
Well, she gave 3 examples. The first family was a father who was a non-member, so the family didn't have access to the priesthood in the home. And so the hope was that he would be baptized, and then they would go to the temple, and then the temple would give the family priesthood power. And then the second family were members but needed the temple ordinances. And the third family, the husband had died in a car accident, and the woman needed to be, I don't know if it was a car accident. Anyway, the woman needed to be sealed to him, and that the son was ordained to the Aaronic priesthood, so the family had the priesthood in their home. And I honestly felt like she was giving these examples of women who needed the priesthood in their lives, and she tried to tie it to temple endowment. But I think she made a case for saying that there are women out there who need priesthood power in their homes and have no way to access it without the actions of other people.
Exactly. I mean, that's when I shot Brandt the message online saying, is it just me, or is she making a case for women having the priesthood? She's giving examples of women who are denied blessings from God and protection from God because they don't have a man in their home with the priesthood. It seemed an awful lot to me like a case for female ordination.
That was what was confusing me because, again, I talk about how she kept jumping that line. On one side, you could hear her saying, maybe to believers, this is the reason why you need to be worthy of the priesthood or be around the priesthood, or this is why we have the priesthood in situations like this. There's another side that says maybe, because these women didn't have the priesthood, maybe that it was just very, like you said, it was very confusing. I think that you're going to see those who are advocates for female ordination, they're going to take that talk and run with it because there was a lot of ambiguity there, and those who are opposed might take that talk and run with it as well. And
I also think that she made a good point. One of you made the point that she talked about womanhood, motherhood, and compared that with men, manhood, and fatherhood. She left priesthood out of that comparison, which I think is a really powerful message.
Well,
that's
really.
And that's something that's actually been a soft spot for Ashley. We haven't been private about the fact that it's been kind of difficult for us to get to the point now where we have children. But it always bothered Ashley when she heard that there was that comparison between priesthood and motherhood, because I guess in her English major mind, her first thought was no, the correct correlation is fatherhood and motherhood. And to hear it put like that, woman, womanhood, motherhood, man, manhood, fatherhood, it really takes that whole priesthood aspect out of it, so that you could say the correlation, that was in essence a statement that said the correlation between priesthood and motherhood is invalid. I mean, if we're following the logic correctly, am I right there?
Yeah. It also plays into what the feminist camp and ordained women say, that's exactly what they say, that we shouldn't be comparing the priesthood to motherhood. So that's another check mark in using this talk towards the empowerment of women with the priesthood. And then something else that she said when she was talking about motherhood, fatherhood, blah, blah, she directed comments to men saying, do you realize the power that you have? Do you understand your responsibilities? And then she basically asked the same questions of women, and she said, women, are you ready to receive the power of the priesthood? Now, that could be interpreted by the faithful who don't think women should be ordained to mean the power of the ordinances of the priesthood, the things that are brought into your life by having a priesthood holder in your life and getting blessings and blah, blah, blah. But it can also be interpreted as, women, are you ready to be ordained? It was a very confusing talk, for sure.
And I think it's going to be one that, again, that's not so much divisive, but it's going to be a talk that gets referenced and it'll be referenced by both camps.
Sure. I think that, we were going to talk about these big 3, but I have to bring up Robert D. Hale's talk where he says we all must search for inspiration, and the messages that they give in conference can have individual interpretations. And I think it's totally fine for people to interpret Sister Stevens' talk in different ways that applies to them. I don't think there's going to be one universal interpretation. Mm-hmm. And I hate to see the talk being used as a weapon by either side. I would hope that people can take a personal interpretation from that and work from that.
No, I totally agree. All right, let's go to Elder Bednar. Elder Bednar talked about tithing. I don't know how the listeners felt. I don't know how Jerilyn and Heather felt, but as soon as he mentioned tithing, I cringed and I braced for impact, because that is one of those that is very, granted, I'm still a young guy, so I haven't been observing this for as long as other people, but it seems like within the last 5 years, tithing and church finances, and specifically transparency with church finances, has become really, really big. And part of me wonders if that's just because information is more readily available now than it was 20 years ago. But as soon as he mentioned tithing, I braced for impact. But I think the one thing that did save it a little bit for me was the fact that when he was going to talk about two separate things with tithings. He wanted to talk about the blessings of tithings and then the simplicity of the Lord's way. So before we get into that, the one thing that stood out to me that I was thankful for in his first part of his talk was he chose not to emphasize the super dramatic things that happen with paying tithing. And if you're talking to a believer audience, the believer audience loves to suck that stuff up because they say, oh, that's great. I pay my tithing and this is going to happen. But again, to a believer audience, it's good to know, okay, you need to temper yourselves a little bit. What were your thoughts on that first section of his talk when he was talking about that?
One of the things that I heard years ago was that when you give something, when you give money to somebody or give a gift to somebody, if you're expecting something in return, it's not really a gift, it's a loan. And so what I really loved was that he didn't focus on, like you said, focus on those big things like, okay, if I pay my tithing, these are the things I'm going to get. We're not loaning money when we pay our tithing, we're giving our money. So when we expect things in return, we take away the whole principle of tithing, really. And so what I loved was he talked about us being able to look for things that we've been blessed with because of paying a faithful tithe. So I thought that was an important point, to be able to look for the blessings. And sometimes they were simple and small, that they weren't these big, huge things that would happen to us for paying tithing, that we pay and then we can look for the blessings.
Heather, can I ask you a gotcha question? Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm going to set this up because this is something that I saw a lot. When I was monitoring what people were saying about this talk, it seemed like a lot of people were talking disparagingly about someone that, kind of like what Jerilyn said, give freely of their money to an organization like a church. Is it a bad thing if people decide to do that? And that's why I said this is a gotcha question. But me as a believer, I have no qualms about donating my money to tithing. I might have some issues over some things, but at the end of the day, I do it because it makes me feel good. I feel like I'm following God's commandments and things like that. Does that make me a blind believer? Do people think less of people who donate to something like tithing? Or are there certain organizations out there, like I donated to the Red Cross? Okay, that one's acceptable. But donate to a church, that's not acceptable. You understand kind of where I'm going with that logic a little bit?
I do. I can't speak for all apostates out there. I don't see somebody who is willingly giving their money to the church as blind. I see them as choosing to give their money to an organization that does not provide them with information about how that money is handled. And that's their choice, and that's fine. But even if I were a believer, I would not feel compelled to do that.
Which is a valid point. And I recognize that was a gotcha question. I think that's a valid point, and I appreciate you saying that. Like I said, it's not that I feel guilty about it, but it seems like if someone admits it, then the first words out of people who are disaffected or not believers, the first words out of their mouth are something like, well, don't you know, this and that, and that's why I get frustrated, because it's like, I understand that there's not much I can do, but at the same time, it's part of my religious service. And, anyways, do you have any thoughts on that, Jerilyn, or we want to go to part two of
you are so freaking crafty, Brandt. You are trying to keep me from opening my mouth on this talk.
Listen, so just to pull back the curtain really quick, before we came on, Heather and I had a discussion who wants to host the podcast, who wants to edit it. So the benefit of me hosting the podcast is I can quickly move along. I guess the benefit of Heather editing the podcast is she can edit it how she wants.
Yeah.
But so, Heather, tell me your thoughts on that first portion of Bednar's talk, because I have to imagine that not so much that it struck a nerve with you, but that you had some pretty passionate thoughts about some of the things that he was saying.
Well, it struck a nerve because and this is blunt apostate Heather talking here.
Brace for impact.
I find it disgusting for a rich man to stand in front of a worldwide church that is full of a lot of people who have very dire financial circumstances and tell them that their salvation is dependent upon them giving money to the church. And then to talk about how the church, and this is kind of part of it, the second part of his talk about how they should be handling their money and being content with what they have, and basically that if they are striving for more in their lives, that they are not being grateful and they're not attuned to the Spirit. I just found it disgusting. I don't think a man who has his level of financial security and comforts in this world should be telling poor people to give their widow's mite to the church so they can build a mall and scream, "Let's go shopping."
I am really glad you didn't hold back.
I mean, it's Jerilyn, it's tough to, what you can say to that, is there?
No, there, and on many levels, I agree. I remember years ago, a friend of mine couldn't attend a wedding for her daughter because she couldn't make up some back tithing. And I thought it was unfortunate that she felt like she had to buy her way into a wedding. That's another whole subject entirely. I totally understand where you're coming from. So there you have it. I can see both sides.
I think one of the things that stood out was that was very much a line in the sand moment. That was Bednar putting a line out there and saying, this is what you must do. And there are some people who really embrace that, for lack of a better word. They sit there and say, yes, wow, he's calling everyone to task. But at the same time, I've known some people that it's a struggle and they feel guilty. And what if they have health bills? Stuff happens I'm trying to say stuff happens like that. Okay. And there's stuff you can't prepare for. One of the things he said was that there are significant but subtle blessings within tithing, and tithing, in a sense, if you're paying tithing, then you might be able to pay for your healthcare bills. I don't remember his exact logic. I just remember listening to that going, did you talk about Obamacare? Is that what you're alluding to there? I mean, it kind of wasn't it?
Honestly, that part irritated me too, because basically what he's saying is if you go looking for any good things that happen to be in your life, those are attributed to tithing. His mother-in-law apparently pointed out to his wife, "Oh, look, we have very small doctor bills, so you're healthy. My parents fork out over $15,000 a year on medical care for my father. Does that mean that they're not being blessed?" I mean, I understand that, well, maybe that's just not the blessing that God is giving them. But if you're going to take that tack, then anything can confirm what you're saying. Any good thing is attributed to you paying tithing. Any good thing is a blessing. It doesn't pass the sniff test for me. I understand the reasoning for somebody giving those examples in their talk, but it's like they don't think of the converse of that. When you say that you get X for doing Y, people who aren't getting X, it doesn't work. It's like it's like a being backhanded. It just doesn't work.
Did either of you see the Silver Linings Playbook?
Yes.
Okay. So for those of you who haven't seen it, there's a lot of discussion there on mental issues and illness and things like that. But one of the things that was very apparent that stood out to me was the father, every time the Jets were playing, the father had to have his lucky stuff and everything had to be so. And when you're describing it that way, Heather, I'm kind of sitting here saying, with comparison to tithing, you could say the same thing. You know what? I've noticed that for me, when the Detroit Tigers baseball team is doing really well, life is great. I mean, we don't have any medical problems, but as soon as they start not doing so well, we start having problems. But it's kind of along those same lines, the fact that, okay, so my sports team is doing well, the weather looks good, and so things are going to go okay. And that's where I get a little upset when I hear things like what you're saying, Heather, because there are some people who are totally in like that. I don't know, maybe for me, I look at it as tithing is something I do, and sometimes there's good things that happens, but I always get uncomfortable trying to, this is exactly because of that, because you start going down that rabbit hole really quickly.
I totally agree, and I lost my train of thought.
Well, I was going to say, I would hope that you would encourage me to go down the rabbit hole, as I think the pot for Malone leaving the church is probably in the thousands right now.
No, what I was going to say, I just remembered, is that something else that struck me while he was talking is that and this is an insult, I can't help it. The church's level of moral development is so immature. Every time they talk about doing the right thing, it's because you'll be blessed. They're dangling a carrot in front of your face. The only reason you guys do anything good is because you're trying to get something out of it. And I think, Why can't you just do the right thing because it's the right thing to do and a grown-up does the right thing? Which, it sounds to me, is your approach to why you pay tithing. So good job having a better moral development than the church, Brandt.
Thank you, Heather.
Well, I think that goes back to my point earlier, where when we give something and expect something in return, it's not a gift, it's a loan. Mm-hmm. And that's not the way I want to worship. I want to give freely and not expect something in return.
Yep. I have two more things I really want to throw out about this talk.
Yeah.
One of them is he had an awfully convenient, and this happens all the time, but he had an awfully convenient interpretation of Section 119. And I forgot to look up Section 119 of the Doctrine and Covenants, but he only read the part about your interest, the 10% of your interest.
Right.
And there was something in there about to make an accounting annually, wasn't there?
Well, and isn't there also something in there that when you join the church, you give everything you own to the church? That was conveniently left out. It's like they're reading Section 119 the way they read Section 132. They're like, oh, this is what we want it to mean now. So this is what we'll say it means now. Continuing Revelation, folks. That was mean, I'm sorry. But the other thing I wanted to say is that he said that he so desperately wished that the members of the church could attend these tithing whatever meetings that he attends where they discuss how they're going to spend tithing money, and he so desperately wishes that church members could see how dutiful the leadership is with the spending of their money.
Before you get into that, because I know you're building up for a rant, I just want to read D&C 119:4 and 5,
Okay.
and after that, those who have thus been tithed shall pay 1/10 of all their interest annually, which is what he quoted, and this shall be a standing law unto them forever for my holy priesthood, saith the Lord. Verily I say unto you, it shall come to pass that all those who gather unto the land of Zion shall be tithed of their surplus properties, and shall observe this law, or they shall not be found worthy to abide among you. And so it looks like that's just about all that's in there. But how
You should give your surplus property to the church.
exactly?
I wonder how many baptisms they'd get if they told investigators that.
Anyway,
So back to what I was saying.
you were talking about the Council on the Disposition of Tithes
Yes.
and his role in that, right?
He so desperately wishes that the members of the church could see how well that the church spends their money. And this is what I wrote. Then maybe you should be transparent, dipshit. Imagine that. If
I
they
don't
would
know
be
how that would go over.
if they would be transparent, then the congregation would have the blessing of knowing what good financial stewards the leadership is. I'm sorry, Brandt. It's turned out that you've got feisty Heather, not playful Heather.
Feisty Heather is good for ratings, though. No, as soon as he started going down that road, I cringed because I knew that it wasn't going to end well. And I guess that's the biggest thing is it's very convenient for him to have that worldview of how things go. But at the same time, you're not making the mall isn't a secret anymore. Mm-hmm. And there's people who know the church's involvement in the mall. And if you're sitting here saying that everyone should be okay with this because this is a worthy opportunity for the church to use its tithes and blah, 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 I just sit there and say, do you not get it? Like, do you not get? And that's the question. If I could give him some truth serum, I'd ask two questions if I could ask Elder Bednar anything with truth serum. Question number one, what is your wife's first name? Because all we've ever heard her described as is Sister Bednar. And I wonder if, like, that's how he describes her at home. Number two, what did you think was going to happen? Because that's one of those that has been mismanaged. And I know people, here's my clout. I know people who were involved with that project. The person that I know who was directly involved in working with the church had nothing but frustrations to talk about how the church didn't get it. And his company was trying to explain to them, we've got this and we've got that. And the church didn't get it.
Can I break in really quick to say that Elder Bednar's wife's name is Susan?
Oh, thank you.
There you go. There you go.
I'd still like to keep it in the back of my mind, though, that good to see you, Sister Bednar. Rough day at the office today. What's for dinner? Okay, was there anything else we wanted to talk about with Elder Bednar before we go to the Silver Fox himself?
Yeah.
Yeah, you good,
Oh,
Jerilyn?
no. Let's go straight to the fox.
All right. First of all, I'd like to encourage everyone, if you haven't seen it, you should look up the YouTube video, What Does the Fox Say? It's by a Swedish group. That's every time I hear the Silver Fox now, I think of that. I'm going to say something very sacrilegious, but it was almost true. As I was chatting with Heather during his talk, I think I described my feelings on his talk as borderline orgasmic because it was pretty accurate for me. I was over the moon. Do either of you want to recap this, or do you want me to recap it? I'm worried that I will be distracted and start.
I think you're so turned on that you'll describe it well.
I do want to break in really quick and say that after Elder Bednar's talk about tithing, and when President Uchtdorf starts talking about how we must consecrate everything, and he starts going on this list of how much time we spend in church, I thought, oh my goodness, no, we cannot have this right after a tithing talk. Because I thought it was going to go another direction.
Mm-hmm. Me too.
So President Uchtdorf gets up and he starts talking about this hypothetical situation, describing all the things that we do in the church. And I was talking with some disaffected people, and they were kind of saying, I know, look at how much the church is involved in your life. And I personally took a step back and I thought about it. And I said, I just think about what my week has been like this week. I had church on Sunday, plus I had to teach on Sunday, plus I had mutual on Thursday, plus I had another stake meeting I had to be at on Thursday, plus I'm going to be watching 10 hours of general conference, plus we've got all this other stuff that needs to happen. Wow, I do a lot with it. And he described the people that were describing all these things that we do within the church as very, very happy and pleased and satisfied with what was going on. And as a quick aside, I think that there's a lot of people who do feel a good sense of fulfillment with that. I know I do, and actually my wife has to sometimes tell me, you got to scale it back, Brandt, because I need you at home. You're going to be a dad soon. You can't be doing everything. But would you both agree with me that there are a good amount of LDS people who do find fulfillment, even being as busy as they are?
Definitely.
Yes, I agree with that.
So it seems like it's just going to be a basic talk, and I was kind of zoning out a little bit. And then he starts talking about this search for truth, and he says, one might ask, if the gospel is so wonderful, why would anyone leave? I sat straight up. I wasn't straight up. I sat straight up. And I thought, okay, this could either be really bad or really good. And it ended up turning out to be something, and I'll put sensitive Brandt out there for all of you. I was literally on the brink of tears when I was listening to it, because it was a talk where he described those who have doubts, those who have questions, those who have even left the church. And he said it's okay. And he said this is part of, maybe I'm putting words in his mouth, this is part of our journey. This is part of who we are as people. This is part of, dare I say, the plan of salvation, that we have to ask questions. And it seemed like he was kind of giving a little bit of a pass to people that leave, saying there are some people that leave and that's their choice. I mean, Heather, as an apostate, what were your feelings when you were, or what were you thinking when he was giving this talk and specifically talking about those who have left the church?
Well, I really liked that he specifically addressed the idea that people who leave are offended or want to sin. Mm-hmm. He said that's not the case. It's much more complicated than that, which I appreciated. And he also referenced Article of Faith number 11 a number of times and said that we need to respect people's rights to have their own religious journey, basically. And I appreciated that. Uchtdorf gave a talk at BYU a while back that I'd actually like to do an episode about, and this could probably be a part of that episode, where he's already so ecumenical, and so it doesn't surprise me that he takes this approach, but that he wants to, it seems like he wants to stop the demonization of people who leave. And I think that's great. So, I mean, I definitely was pleased with his talk in that aspect. So that was my reaction that way. Although I didn't find what he said after that to be compelling. I appreciated that he said that people leave over unanswered questions, but then he went on to say basically that there's just answers that you don't have, that when you see the entire picture, you'll see that it's true. And he talked about people doubting and how doubting is a good thing. And I'm getting to the point where I'm tired of the word doubting. I don't doubt anything. I don't have doubts. I don't believe it's true. I've passed the doubt part.
You know, we've talked about doing an episode on like the top 10 misused words. I think that should be in that episode, because we use doubts in place of disbelief, don't we? Mm-hmm. I mean, in a sense we do. I mean, there are some people who legitimately have doubts, but it seems like doubt is now code word for disbelief. And
yes.
in a situation like yours, Heather, like you said, it's not a matter of doubt at all. It's a matter of I just don't believe it. So what now, you know?
Yeah. And then he went on to say, like, if you're looking for a place of perfect people, you're not going to find it. If you're looking for a place where there aren't hypocrites, he gave some story about, you know, somebody might say, or somebody has said, I know somebody in your church and they're a hypocrite. And I just think, thanks for being on our side a little bit, but that is so petty. And maybe there are people out there who think something that ridiculous, but it's really not the case for most apostates. So, but I understand that he's speaking to a believing audience and that he can't reinforce any validity for us leaving. He has to say that we've done the wrong thing. And I do, because I know he has to say that, I really do appreciate that he doesn't demonize us and he's basically calling for apostates to be treated with more dignity. I really do appreciate that.
There's a quote that I wanted to read that references what you were talking about. He said, some of our dear members struggle for years with the questions whether they should separate themselves from the church. In this church that honors personal agency so strongly, that was restored by a young man who asked questions and sought answers, we respect those who honestly search for truth. It may break our hearts when their journey takes them away from the church we love and the truth we have found, but we honor their right to worship Almighty God according to the dictates of their own conscience, just as we claim that privilege for ourselves. The thing that was key about that quote was that there wasn't a but on the end. It seemed like it happens, and we need to respect that. And I think it's a little different for people like myself and even Jerilyn, who's outside of the Mormon mountain range, although where you're at, there's a decent amount, but still, there's not that same stigma that it might be within Utah, Idaho, Arizona. And I think, Heather, you probably see it more often than other people, just, based on your location and where you live. I think that's important. And maybe that was something that the Utah people or even the basic members and Mormons out here where we live, that's what they need to know. There is no but. That's their choice. Don't demonize them. It's not sin. It's not anything like that.
I agree. And I think that's a great message. And I hope if this remains a subject that he addresses regularly, I hope that a conversation builds around believers shouldn't destroy their families over this. They shouldn't lose respect for their husbands and seek divorce, or their wives and seek divorce. And that I would love to see him take that on as like a pet subject.
So are you a little bit on Team Dieter?
Well, I mean, let's be serious here. I'm interested in the church in like a hobby way. Mm-hmm. And when I look at the leadership of the church, there are people who I find repugnant, and there are people who I think, yeah, you're a decent guy. And Uchtdorf is definitely one of those that I think is a decent guy.
Tell me if I'm putting words in your mouth, but it seems like one of the reasons why Dieter seems to appeal to you is because his message is just a basic human message that you could give outside of a Mormon context.
Yeah, be a decent person, respect other people, search for truth. I can't fault those messages. Those are good messages.
Jerilyn, just quickly on the side, this is just between you and me. Heather doesn't have to hear this, but we're going to get her back.
No.
We'll get her back.
No, I respect her agency to go where she wants to go.
I respect your agency, Heather. I respect your agency, Heather, but I don't have to like it. So there. That's tough words for me. Jerilyn, what about your thoughts on President Uchtdorf's talk?
I've been a pretty vocal and public supporter of ordained women, and hearing, there's been so much rhetoric from members saying, you guys are all apostates, you need to leave, go form your own church. To me, this spoke directly to that. To me, I'm hoping that the message that the members get out of this is we need to embrace those who are different, especially those who are trying to stay, that the church is for them too, and that we want this diversity. We want everybody in here. So many people have so much to offer, and that we don't want to separate them from us. Mm-hmm. That's what I took out of it, but I'm coming at it from a believer's standpoint, who interacts daily with people all over the faith spectrum related to the church.
There's just one thing we're running low on time here, so I want to add one more thought, and then we'll go around as a quick roundtable just to talk about any of the other talks that stood out to you. But the thing that stood completely out to me, and this might be something that believers and maybe even apostates might appreciate. If you seek truth, meaning, and a way to transform faith into action, if you are looking for a place of belonging, come join with us. If you have left the faith you once embraced, come back again, join with us. If you are tempted to give up, stay yet a little longer. There is room for you here. I plead with all who read or hear these words, come join with us. Come heed the call of the gentle Christ. Take up your cross and follow him. Come join with us. And I think that's kind of like what Heather and I were saying. It's a very humanist message. It's a very kind and loving message, and treating people like people and not members versus non-members. And I know for Ashley and I, it stood out, and Ashley was asleep through most of this. And then as soon as he started talking, she woke up, which, tells me something.
Because he's hot.
Probably, but it was something that stood out, and I really appreciated. What about final thoughts on the other speakers that we had? Elder Robert D. Hales, Elder Dubé from Zimbabwe, Elder Soares, or President Monson. Any other thoughts on either of those talks from either of you?
You know, I have to say that I think when President Monson gets up to speak, we're all expecting some great big revelation anymore. And he didn't do that this time. He just sort of said, hey, we got all these missionaries and we need to support them. I think it was a call for money, but there was some disappointment there because I'm always expecting something exciting to happen. And I was I really loved hearing Edward Dubé speak.
I could listen to him for hours, like his accent and the way he spoke with passion. And
yeah, it was wonderful.
I thought he was a good speaker, but I didn't really feel like he said much.
It sounded like he was former CES, and you could hear that coming out because everything he said had to be backed up and quoted by a current living general authority. It's very much the CES model, and that's what they're trained to do is you need to back everything up with what someone current has said, which I have my own issue. I mean, it brings up hero worship and all those different things, but racially insensitive comment, I was just thankful to see a black man up there. I mean, and I'm not trying to be, too flippant about that because I sit here and there are wards in Michigan that are predominantly African American, and one of those areas is near us. As a matter of fact, they split it in half, so we have a good portion of their ward. And I'm thinking about those people in my ward saying, you know what? I wonder what that means to them to see a black man giving a powerful sermon. Anyways,
and I don't think that's a small point. And I can't remember where I heard this, but it's powerful to see people who look like you and who come from your ethnicity or culture in positions of authority and achievement. That is powerful for people. It means something. It affects how they feel about themselves. So it's not a small thing to consider, and it's not a small thing to be grateful for.
That's why women want to see more women giving talks and praying in conference.
Look at you. You got to get that
always bring it back to the feminist agenda.
There is one point that I do need to clarify before we wrap up. I mentioned that I was, a little weepy during President Uchtdorf's talk, but I also mentioned that I was borderline orgasmic. I just want to clarify, when I'm orgasmic, I'm not weepy. That was two mutually unassociated things. And
I think you should also clarify that it was a manly cry.
It was very much a manly cry. And I'd also appreciate if no one contacted my wife and tell her this because she'd be mortified. But other than that, it's going to be a very interesting session of conference this year, I have a feeling. Thank you for coming on. I appreciate you guys recording on a Saturday, and we will talk to you again after a while. Stay tuned for the PM session.
Bye, folks.
Bye.
Hi, and welcome to another review of General Conference. We're going to be talking about Saturday afternoon session General Conference. Lots to talk about. It's myself, Clay, and then we also have Julie. Hello, Julie.
Hi, Clay.
And Peter. Hi, Peter.
Hi.
So, awesome people to participate, I think, in this General Conference session in particular. Always, I'm sure they have extremely keen insights, but I think there's a couple talks that they're going to be able to really add some good content to. We're trying to keep these episodes tight and short, so we're not going to do a blow-by-blow talk, but if you do want to know kind of what went down Saturday afternoon, Uchtdorf conducted, Eyring did the whole sustaining of authorities, Packer did a talk, Todd Christofferson, which is one of the 12, he talked. And then we had some 70, Gifford Nielsen, Arnulfo Valenzuela, Timothy Ditches. And then we also had Jeffrey Holland, Russell Ballard, and we had a woman give another prayer at the end of General Conference, so we can talk about that. But I'm going to kick us off. I asked our panelists to think about some absolutely horrible things that were said and then maybe some good things. And so I'm going to start us off on what I think was a positive note. I'm surprised I'm saying this, and I never thought I would ever say this, but I thought Jeffrey Holland's talk was the best of the bunch and possibly one of the better talks I've ever heard in General Conference. But I'm interested to hear both Peter and Julie's input, because I've read some negative input about this talk as well. Let me talk about what I thought it was good, and you guys can respond.
Okay.
Jeffrey Holland talked about mental illness and emotional disorders. I felt like he said, hey, there's nothing to be ashamed of. This is a medical condition that, if you had a kidney failure, you would take medicine for it. You can, do it for mental disorders. He said, square your shoulders and kind of attack it approach isn't always useful. And, he shared things about faith that I don't agree with, and things like that. But I thought it was a good issue. I thought it needed to be talked about. He talked about charity. I found it incredibly unoffensive. And I'm not only saying, and I'm not even saying that as like someone, as an outsider. I mean, just to be 100% transparent, I mean, I take a daily dose of SSRIs to deal with anxiety and depression. Family members have been affected by bipolar disorder. And so, anyway, but I did read I heard some criticism. So either Peter or Julie, what do you guys have to say about
I'm with you, Clay. I totally loved this talk. I think Holland nailed it. He hit all the points that need to be hit. He validated the mental illness and how, like you said, it's like a tumor. That's huge. He talked about holding on to hope, talked about triggers, acceptance, self-care. He talked about self-care and coping skills, reaching out to professionals. I mean, I think he did his homework on this one. What do you think, Peter?
Yeah, I was shocked when I heard that Jeffrey R. Holland was coming up to speak. I was like, okay, I'm ready for something. And this was totally not what I expected. I was so blown away to hear him say, like right at the beginning, that there should be no shame in acknowledging mental illness. Yeah. I thought that was huge. Yeah. I mean, it just happens. It's something that I do in my personal life as well, as I work with like a mental illness destigmatizing community organization. So this is a huge deal. And then like you guys said, I mean, he hit a lot of like important points. I wish he would have put like the seeking help from professionals a little higher in priority. Absolutely.
Yeah, same thing.
But
it came down later.
Yeah, but generally, I mean, he still told people to seek help from mental health professionals. At the end of his talk, he said to be merciful, non-judgmental, and kind. And I thought that was awesome. That was a truly Christian sentiment, I thought, which was nice to hear.
And even like, so we're talking about Jeffrey Holland, like a bulldog of a man, right?
Yeah.
Like, both in like speaking quality and physical appearance. But he even comes down and admits that he has struggled with depression in the past, and he admits that George Albert Smith suffered from chronic depression, a previous prophet of the church. And so, and he talked about Abraham Lincoln. He talked about a lot of great people that have suffered from depression. I did read some feedback online that I felt like there was a woman that was upset about the talk, feeling that he gave the impression that just with like faith and prayer, depression can be healed. And I didn't get that impression personally, but maybe you guys did.
No, I didn't. I mean, he definitely is talking first and foremost, like Peter said, faith in God is above all else. I mean, he says that right out. And he says go to the bishop first and take the sacrament, believe in miracles, all those things first before in fact, the line that he gave is, if the bitter cup does not pass, drink it and be strong, which I thought, and that we just call that acceptance. If you're accepting that you need help, that's step one. So I didn't feel at all that it was a negative thing in terms of only God will help you through it or whatever. I mean, he clearly outlined all sorts of things to do to help.
Yeah, and I guess I felt like his emphasis was, I mean, while not my ideal situation, it was still expected, and it wasn't like worse than expected. Because, I mean, you expect a spiritual leader to encourage the flock to rely on spiritual things. So, I mean, it wasn't that surprising that he put that as the most important thing. But so I guess what I ended up focusing on was more the fact that he still told everyone to seek out professional help if the faith and stuff doesn't work.
Yeah, I agree. I thought it was awesome. So let's go with, how about you, Julie? You have something negative or positive you want to point out? There were a lot of doozies. I don't want to, I started us off on a positive foot. You take it away. You throw a topic out there for us to talk about.
Well, we were so positive. I don't know. Maybe we should try something else. I sort of wanted to talk about Elder Nielsen's talk, the former BYU quarterback, Gifford Nielsen, which I found was like a grand pep rally or something. I just imagined he spent a lot of time not only on the field, but I believe he's a former radio announcer. It just seemed like everything was very much like, rah, rah, we can do it, shish kebab, the exclamation point emphasis, if you say it loud enough, if we've got spirit, so let's hear it. That's what I was hearing throughout this whole talk, about missionary work. He just wanted to make sure we were all really excited about it.
Yeah, it was a bit pep rally-ish, no doubt, and he kind of had that projection by all means.
Yeah, so he had that, and then the next talk was on missionary work by...
Arnulfo Valenzuela.
Yeah. Which was kind of funny because he's like, it's all very simple and small things that will really, push the work forward. And it was very much the antithesis of Gifford's talk, Elder Nelson's talk.
Well, and I felt like Valenzuela's was a bit offensive as well, that, he gives the impression that all less active members need are a hug and a hymn. And everything's okay, so.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, in fact, there was a line from him. He talked about one woman, he gave an example of a woman that decided not to come to church. And he did like this pause, like, whoa. Like, that's the big, I was waiting for the punchline, like, what's the sin? What something happened? Was she thinking? What doesn't she believe in? But it was just that. She decided.
Like, can you imagine that?
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah, and everyone that's not Mormon's like, what's going on?
In Valenzuela, I wrote down like a paraphrase quotation. He says, "When we reach out, they will return without hesitation." And I was like, really? Like, he so oversimplified it.
Uh-huh.
It was kind of insulting.
Those two, and there was another one, I think, Ballard at the end. It was all about missionary work. And for me, personally, so some of the things that were said about missionary work and less actives were a bit offensive, but more than anything for me, those talks were just boring. Gifford Nielsen, even though he had kind of the Muppet Rally type of persona. But something, and I don't want to talk about this because other people will talk about it. I don't want to focus on Uchtdorf's statement during, I think, Saturday morning about this idea of doubting your doubts before you doubt your faith. I'm sure you guys saw that making its rounds online, yes?
Yes,
Oh, yeah.
absolutely.
Okay, so I don't want to focus on that statement because that was for those guys, but it blows my mind that there are 3 talks about missionary work that is essentially inviting people to doubt their faith, not doubt their doubts. And then another apostle gets up and says, oh, but us, you guys just doubt your doubts, don't doubt your faith. But then we're going to invite the entire world to doubt their faith, not doubt their doubts. And it's mind-boggling. And I feel like it's blatant and ugly hypocrisy. And
I agree.
Mm-hmm. Same. I think Ballard even acknowledged, oh no, we're going to talk about missionary work here again, trying to rally people up again. And I don't know, I just felt like this 80,000 missionaries that are now out in the field or whatever, we're all expecting some kind of, what do you call it, a hastening of the work. We're all expecting like this big, huge event. And I'm wondering what's going to happen with the setup. What if no converts come from all these extra missionaries? I think it's going to be a grand experiment because we've really set this up as something fabulously special.
Yeah. So this was my first Mormon meeting in over a year. So I was really paying attention to stuff, and I noticed that all the talks on missionary work, like member missionary work, they felt a lot like really boring sales meetings in a multi-level marketing corporation or something like that. Like, the Lord is hastening his work, and then he talks about all the numbers. We have this many missionaries out, and it was really boring. It was the same old stuff.
And the multi-level marketing idea kind of sat hard with me when you just said it, Peter. I think that's exactly right. And, the scripture that they always quote about how great your joy will be if you bring one soul to Christ, how great would your joy be if you brought many? Can you just see that as, that is multi-level marketing right there, right?
Yeah. Exactly. And I got that feeling so strong. I was like, really? This is like a sales meeting. This is terrible.
So yeah, lots of missionary work. All right, Peter, your turn. Good, bad, or ugly. What do you want to talk about?
Well, so the one thing that stuck out to me, I feel like I definitely won't be the first person to ever bring this up, but since we watched the session that had the sustaining of authorities, that's not the most exciting part. In fact, it's pretty boring, but my social psychology mind gets so irritated at that. Like, that was one of the things during my disaffection that really started grating at me, was all the sustaining votes in church and stuff. And in general conference, to me, it demonstrates how little point there is to the sustaining action. There's no reasonable way for a good member to disagree when they offer those sustaining votes. And so the whole point is just to create the illusion of consensus in the membership. Yeah. And that stuff seems really cultish to me. That's one of the things that really started irking me by the time I was on my way out. And so seeing it in general conference, I mean, most people are sustaining from home, and the people in the conference center, if someone doesn't stick up their hand, it doesn't make a big deal. There's so much pressure to conform, all this, like the social influence in that situation. There's no way for someone to disagree and for it to have any effect. And so therefore, the only effect it has is giving the impression that everyone is unanimous in their support of church leaders.
No, I agree 100%. And something that I did notice, and I don't know if this was purposeful or not, so I can't say, but it caught my attention just kind of to reinforce what you're saying, that there is no way to disagree and be noticed, is that when they sustained the prophet during that meeting, the camera immediately cut away after the sustaining happened. And right when he said, and anybody opposed, the camera shot cut away back to the podium. Now, that didn't happen during all of them, but it did happen, and I don't know if it was purposeful or not. But it made me wonder, with kind of the fervor within the media and a lot of groups getting together kind of in opposition, Mormons for equal rights within the gay and lesbian community, and then also the ordained women movement and things like that. I kind of wondered, are they purposefully trying to like prevent a live broadcast of a bunch of people standing up in opposition? But that's just speculation on my part.
Yeah, I mean, the truth is they do it in every meeting, local meetings, and it's the same idea. So,
how about man? I'm surprised nobody has brought up Todd Christofferson's talk.
Bad
Julie,
news
go
always
for
comes
it.
at the end. Bad news always. I didn't want to even touch that talk if we could avoid. It's like puke. You don't want to touch it. It was bad for me as a woman. It was bad. I didn't even know.
So let me give kind of a recap so listeners know at least what his theme was, and I'd actually like to hear details from you, Julie, about.
Okay.
I mean, I thought it was offensive as well, but I'd like you to give the nitty gritty. But Todd Christofferson essentially gives this kind of equal but different talk and what the role of women are in the church and in the world. And I'll let you take it away.
Well, I mean, he starts out saying, societies have relied on women to be this moral force. And then he builds up this pedestal. He uses words like, our empathy is natural, we're born of goodness, beautiful, serenity, love personified. I mean, he uses all sorts of things, builds us up on a pedestal, us meaning women. I mean, so sacrificing this. I mean, after a while, I was like, who the hell is he talking about? Like, I don't know any of these women that he's talking about, the way he was describing them. And then he does himself a favor and says, by the way, I don't mean to put you on a pedestal. I don't mean that you are perfect, which probably a good idea to say that because I don't recognize myself. I don't recognize my mother, my sisters. I mean, they're all good people. Nobody's this person that he's talking about, this moral authority. I thought it was a huge disservice to men because it kind of sounded as if he's saying, okay, you women are born good, but we're not so sure about the men, I mean, that's exactly what he's saying.
Yeah, I don't mean to interrupt, but I mean, it seemed exactly like that common narrative that it's women's responsibility to keep men moral,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Which is just so bad.
Yeah, I mean, for both men and women, it's utterly ridiculous that girls are born to have this trait and boys just don't have it.
Yeah,
or that men need to cultivate it to really get there. Do you know what I mean? Like, he just wanted to make sure that point was out there.
Yeah, I mean, he said some crazy stuff. Women help boys become priesthood men.
Yeah.
They're peacemakers that shape the world. And then he talked against abortion, immodesty, and over-sexualized, women or whatever. In my mind, I wouldn't say over-sexualized. That's what he said. But just, women with sexual passions seem to be what he was rallying against. And then he said stuff that I don't know where he's pulling this from. He's talking about how feminist voices attack the value of homemaking and motherhood. Now, I'm not going to claim that I am completely well-versed in all feminist literature or anything, but I have never read feminist voices attacking homemaking or motherhood, but they do attack being told that they are forced to do those things. That is their only role. But I don't know of anybody in our society that actively speaks out against being a good mother.
Yeah, he's just fear-mongering here. He takes the extreme, like, let's say it's 0.0001% of feminists think, we should throw out all homemaking and not value. I mean, that's an old fear-mongering idea. He's rallying the troops. He wants to put a distance between his argument and what real Mormon feminists are saying, which is they value their motherhood. They love their kids. They just don't want to be in a box. That someone else defines what's masculine, what's feminine, and where they can stay, where they can't go. And
No, he used the terms blurring the lines between feminine and masculine, and then he outright said that we do not need. I'm gonna brutalize this quote, but.
Sister Nadal's quote?
Well, he said we don't need more strong and rough women. We need more tender and kind and faithful women, which was just I can't.
You just take that quote and let's just change it to men instead of women, and you just say the world has enough men who are tough. We need men who are tender. I mean, it's true for men too. That he sets up the dichotomy, or in that quote, it's a setup. Of course we need people who are tender. Of course we don't want people to value,
Yeah, but I
terrible.
interpret. I mean, we do need more tender and kind people, and we don't want assholes parading around the world just being mean. But when I hear tender and kind from him, tender, kind, faithful, I hear passive, submissive, and soft-spoken.
Mm-hmm. Well, and he goes on to say, don't be afraid to speak up later, after that. So it's like he doesn't want to blur the gender roles, but at the same time, he can't really define exactly what is, uniquely woman, what is uniquely man, male, female. And I don't think he's going to be able to do it.
Yeah,
frankly.
it seemed to me like the end of his talk was just hedging all the bets that he'd made during the first chunk of his talk. It's just
saying horrible things and then saying, "Oh, but don't misinterpret me."
Yeah. Women are the companion moral authority of men, and men are still important. It's still important that they develop morality and all this stuff. He throws it in at the end as if it's supposed to undo all the nasty stuff he just finished saying.
Yeah, and I think just as a mother, I mean, I have 4 kids, 2 boys, 2 girls, and it's heartbreaking. This talk is heartbreaking because when I see my little boys, there is no difference when they're just little, and they nurture similarly. I mean, they love, they care, compassion. To just say, you females, we need to cultivate this even more, and males, good luck. We'll try to get something out of you in terms of morality. It's such a disservice for my boys, for everyone. It's a disservice. This talk.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Like it.
Totally agree. It's just, it's more of the same old pigeonholing of gender roles.
Agreed.
Yeah, it was bad.
Yeah, and kind of not really in context, but one thing that he pointed out in his talk that made me just shake my head was where he was drawing comparisons, and I forget all the context, but he was like the cradle in the kitchen rather than Congress or whatever. So drawing that comparison as if the cradle and kitchen is where the woman is supposed to be, and Congress is obviously not a place for women. I thought that was just insane to me that he would make that comparison.
The false assumption is we can only be in one place for the rest of our lives, no matter what age we are, whatever,
Yeah.
As if if us women can't, work or be in Congress and be a good mother. He's just saying there's just no way. We need you to do this most important thing,
And that you'll be responsible for the moral decay of the world if you don't.
Yeah. Which let's just say it, the world is, according to all our leaders, church leaders, is in moral decay. So basically it's like, hey, women, you suck,
But that, again, we say this every conference. That's the crazy thing. I just want to mail, Steven Pinker's The Better Angels of Ourselves to the church office building. I mean, the world is becoming less violent. Slavery's at an all-time low. There's less rape than previously. Objectively, the world is becoming a better place.
Yeah.
Well, you wouldn't know it if you listened to Packer.
No.
That first.
Excellent segue.
Yes.
No, that's good. So, that's the Packer came out at the very beginning. I've got a lot of things to say about his talk and other things as well that maybe you guys will want to talk about. But Peter, why don't you maybe give us a synopsis
of Packer's talk?
Yeah, or is there anything that was, didn't spark your ire?
There were a few things. Mostly I felt bad for him. He seemed like he didn't want to be there, and it was just kind of rambling. And it's a good thing it was at the very beginning when I had some energy in me, because otherwise it probably would have put me to sleep.
Sucked the life out of you.
It almost put him to sleep. Like he was confused and almost sleeping during some of that,
Yeah, it was close.
And so before we get into the content of the talk, this is something that I saw, and maybe I'm making a big deal about it. The man had oxygen. The man had oxygen tubes that were hidden behind his glasses and wrapped up underneath his nose. Did anybody else see that?
I didn't.
Go back and look at the video. There are 2 tubes that run the kind of crease in his nose and go up into his nostrils. And the only way I can see that they did that was if they hid it behind his glasses frames and wrapped him up. Go back and look at the video. Tell me that I'm crazy. I looked at that the entire time, which isn't, I mean, he's an old man. He needs oxygen. I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. But what's terrible is that we've got this institution that's hiding it to try to put on this pretense of virility and strength when the man is obviously not up for the job.
Yeah, there was no virility and strength in that talk.
Yeah. Did nobody else see that? Am I making this up?
I'm going to have to take another look.
Okay, take another look and confirm. Text me later on.
It's kind of funny, though, Clay, that it's bugging you so much, because I don't necessarily think if you're talking in a whisper or don't have enough energy physically to get out necessarily means that you don't have the strength to give a talk. I mean, his body is failing.
It wouldn't bug me if they just had the oxygen tube on him. It was the fact that they were hiding it to try to make him appear stronger than he is. That's what bothers me. Yeah, I mean, if he doesn't have the strength, you give the man oxygen. I don't think you should, like, send him out there and be like, good luck, Boyd. Hope you make it through, you know? Yeah. Like, I think that he should have it, but I feel like it's wizardry. I feel like it's again, kind of making this illusion that everything is okay when, no, you know, these men aren't immortal, sustained only by the Spirit of God. I mean, these men are mortal, they're weak, they're having a hard time kind of thing. Anyway.
Yeah.
Well, especially when his talk is about if you're blessed and have a gospel-centered home, then you're going to be blessed in so many other ways, and that's how you stay safe. And here he is, you know, I'm sure he has a gospel-centered home, and boy, life sucks, you know. He's, you know, getting older. It's harder.
Yeah. But I just want to hear him give one talk where he makes it through without saying something anti-homosexual.
I know, right?
Just one talk. He can't do it, man.
Dream on.
And what did he call it? It was like special illnesses required.
Oh, yes. He referred. No, this was something that just is crazy. He referred to priesthood authority as, what was it?
A qualified spiritual physician.
Physicians, yes.
Yeah.
Physicians.
Ugh.
Which I'm thinking, boy, what training do they give our bishops, really?
Yeah.
I mean, nothing, hardly at all.
No doubt.
Yeah, and I thought that label is so dangerous, going back to the mental health thing, because I think too many people in the church go to their bishops and think that the bishop's going to have the answer for them. For things, the bishop's not even qualified. I mean, he doesn't have training. He doesn't have any support. Maybe a 1-800 number, that's it. Yeah, that talk was a lot of fear-mongering. That's what I got out of it.
Well, and I just want to pull one other thing out of his talk that I just thought was weird. I don't necessarily have an answer for it, but he talks about if you have sexual sin in your life, you've got to seek the, you know, assistance of a spiritual physician. And then he talks about this old guy that's brought in by his daughter to talk to Packer and confess some misdeed. And I'm thinking to myself, why is this guy's daughter bringing this guy in? Maybe I'm jumping to conclusions, but it made me think of like possible sexual abuse or something like that. And if that's the case, that's an utterly horrible example to like say, well, here's an example of someone confessing and then everything was hunky-dory afterwards kind of thing. But again, I'm speculating. But it was weird that the guy's daughter brought him in. Like, okay, Dad, we're going to go talk to your bishop about sex, you know, and something you did bad about it, you know.
Yeah. Why would she even know anything? That's true. I didn't even think about that. Well, Packer says something interesting about scripture reading. Scriptures hold the keys to gospel protection. He gave a quote basically saying it doesn't really even matter which scriptures you read. And when I heard that, I was like, really? Because I can think of a whole lot of scriptures that aren't going to help you out too much, you know? Bible verses, scary Bible verses, Doctrine and Covenants 132, you know, the whole second half, damn you to hell, Emma type stuff. Not all scriptures are
no doubt
equal.
Yeah.
I thought that's a little crazy talk right there.
Again, I mean, stuff like confirmation bias, they become buzzwords in like post-Mormon, ex-Mormon communities. But I mean, my social psych brain was like going off. I'm like, he's telling us to read the scriptures and you'll find your solutions. Doesn't matter what scripture you read. He's telling us, you know the solution already. Go read the scriptures and you'll find it. Like, you'll find what you're looking for. And I think that's so irresponsible.
Well, and it leads to a lot of members believing in kind of superstitious things. Going back to Elder Nielsen's talk, he said he saw the exclamation point on the desk, of the bronze shoes. Remember that?
Yeah, and somehow it was meant for him.
It was a subtle message from God, that it was meant for him, that the Lord was answering his prayers because he knew that he was just focused on those exclamation points. So, tender mercies, right? That's the thing, is it leads to such reaching that it's like no matter what you read, then anything you read in the scriptures, you're like, oh yeah, that's this. This is what I'm supposed to do. Which you lose complete sense of any rationalization at that point.
Yep.
It's like just can get lost in superstition.
Tying into one of the other talks where Timothy Ditches or whatever his name is, where he begins his talk with a story about Bethesda, and I thought for the first time, like, that Bethesda story is strange. Like, they wait by the pool for an angel to stir the water or whatever, and I realized that never as a member did I ever wonder if that was actually legitimate or were these people actually just superstitious or whatever. But I mean, that's an example of where I was looking in that story for a certain thing, and that was about Jesus healing the lame man, and the other stuff just doesn't matter, and I think that happens all the time, and that's exactly what Packer was encouraging us to do, is just read the scriptures, doesn't matter what scripture, and look for the answers that we tell you to look for,
And don't be gay.
Yeah.
Well, good. So I think that covers all the talks. Does anybody have any other burning thing that they wanted to talk about before we wrap up?
No, I think.
I mean, so
stuff.
a woman gave the benediction, right? That shouldn't be a huge talking point, but I felt good that at least it was a big deal the first time it happened, and I'm glad that they just didn't stop doing it after that. I guess what I'm saying. I'm glad that they didn't say, okay, they got to pray once, no more praying for them type of thing. So
yeah, I feel like slowly but surely things have really changed in the church for women, especially, but it's so slow. Oh yeah, we gotta say a prayer,
Yeah, it's so inconsequential too.
Yeah, and it doesn't it has no real power.
Mm-hmm.
Token gifts, I guess.
Yeah.
It's disturbing at the same time as that it's exciting.
Absolutely. Well, cool. Peter, Julie, thanks for joining me, and thanks for enduring conference to give a rundown. I appreciate you guys' input.
Yeah, happy to do it.
Yeah, glad to be here. Thanks, Clay.
Sounds good. And thanks to everybody who tuned in. We've got reviews going for all the sessions, so keep listening. Thanks. Bye.
When I gave my heart to you, I swore it would only be for you, but I said that before you broke my heart. When the feelings you feel of you, I can't share mine with you. The lump of pain in my throat won't let me start, and I wish that I didn't ignore. The broken hearts get broken more. Sometimes in our lives we learn things done come back in turn. What did I do to earn nothing from you in life? The mistakes I've had don't do me any bad till I can't handle sad things I've been through. I can learn from mistakes and from sins, but I make them again and again. I wanna fly above the oceans of tears that I've cried, to look down on myself and ask why. For you I won't change me again. It's hard enough that I am who I am. There's so many people who haven't walked in my shoes, but they say that they choose still to be me. Looking at me outside seems like a pleasure ride. I wonder which side of me they would be. I smile to hide all my fears, but still I can't hold back the tears. Oh, I wanna fly, to lose myself There's so much of me I've missed, trying to get that kiss. She said, wear clothes like this. I said, okay. I've been stomped in the ground, molded and twisted round, so long before I found I'm not just clay. I'm worried what others might see, instead of seeking approval from me. I wanna fly so fast that my past passes by, to erase all my past one last tries. If it's true that I'm such a great guy, why can't I look me in the eyes? I want to begin to think of me the way that I am, to forget all the people I've been. I've figured out reasons for why. Now I'll just give me one more last